If you gave me $10,000 and said I had to invest with these stipulations, I had to invest in 5 different stocks. These stocks had to be held for 10 years, and I could only use one valuation metric. What would it be, and what would these stocks be? Hey, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that like, and share this video. All right. Now, the valuation metric I would choose would be the PEG ratio. That's the PEG ratio, which is the price to earnings growth ratio. So that is calculated by taking a PE ratio and divided by the earnings growth. One of these things I learned from Peter Lynch. And the reason I would use that is because I'm always interested in earnings growth. Because as Peter Lynch said, that the earnings, there's a 100% correlation between the earnings growth and the stock price. People get so caught up in stock prices that the earnings growth is directly correlated to the stock price. Now, let me say, normally, I do not advise just using one particular metric. This is just one piece of the puzzle that can be used with a variety of different companies, okay? So, for the PEG ratio, Peter Lynch said that a PEG ratio above 2 would typically signify a stock that's very expensive. One that's below 1 would be a stock that's undervalued. Now, I've all found in the last couple of years, or last decade, that I can be comfortable with a PEG ratio underneath the 1.5. 1.25 or less really gets me excited because I know I'm buying a stock or a company that's really set up for long-term growth. But you also have to look at the rate that the earnings are growing. That's why you can't just use one metric. But the PEG ratio, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Mag 7, and we're going to add in 3 additional stocks to look at the PEG ratio in these particular companies. All right, so if you look here, you see that Broadcom has a PEG ratio of 0.73, Meta 1, Eli Lilly 1.06, NVIDIA 1.09, Taiwan Semiconductor 1.2, Microsoft 1.3, Amazon 1.9, Apple 2.24, Google 2.27, and Tesla 5.54. These came from Yahoo Finance. If you look at different websites, you might get different numbers, but they're somewhat in the same ballpark. As you can see, the top 5, Broadcom, Meta, Eli Lilly, NVIDIA, Taiwan Semi, are all 1.2 or less. So those would be the ones from a price to earnings growth ratio that I would choose just based on this metric because they're the lowest. They tend to be the most undervalued, and they're set up for specifically for long-term growth. Amazon at 1.9, according to this metric, is closer to the overvalued category, but I've owned Amazon now for 10 years, roughly 10 years. And when I look at other metrics, Amazon to me is probably cheaper than at any time that I've owned it for the last decade. Now, if you look at the growth, so I look at it, so $10,000, I want to see how $10,000 invested in these companies have performed in the past. So if you look at January 2020, let's say I invested that same $10,000 that I will invest today, March 18th. These companies would have compounded at 50% per year. So $10,000 invested in January 1st, 2020 will be worth $121,999 at the end of last month. That same $10,000 invested in an index fund will be worth $23,184. Let's go back 10 more years. Let's say I invested the same $10,000 in these same 5 companies. Now, I own all these companies, so this is not anything new for me, but I do own these companies. $10,000 invested January 2015 will be worth $918,146 as of last month. That same $10,000 invested in an index fund will be worth $40,040. So we look at it from a standpoint. I know that the saying past performance is no guarantee of future results, but investing, nothing is guaranteed. I'm not looking for guarantees. I'm looking for mathematical probabilities. And if you own, when you get to the point where you've owned companies for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, you begin to realize that companies over a long period of time tend to function very, very similar. The great companies over a long period of time. So now we're going to use the same time frame 10 years ago, and I'm going to change the scenario a little bit. Let's say instead of 10,000, I invested 100,000. So we're going to invest 100,000, which is 20,000 each in these different 5 companies. The only difference is, other than the 10,000 being 100,000, is that we're going to sell 5% per year. And wherever that 5% per year is, will be used as cash flow or whatever you want to use the money for. So 100,000 selling 5% per year, you still would have netted 42.5% compound annual growth rate, because these are fantastic businesses. So this is what it looks like. You see that the cash flow last year, starting from $100,000, the cash flow or the income, however you want to put it, last year from selling 5% annually would have been $286,295. And that's after 2024 when it was $215,000. Now I own these companies and I'm not selling these businesses. I will own these businesses for a long period of time. And when I tell people that I'm going to sell 5% of my portfolio per year, most people are going to say, well, your portfolio at some point is going to run out of money. Well, that depends on your growth rate. That depends on what you're owning. I went to this retirement seminar and everybody functions off 7 or 8%. But if you don't get 7% or 8%, if your compound annual growth rate is higher like these companies, then you can sell 5% across the board. But you can see how the money continues to compound. Now, the question is, can you go through 2022 when the portfolio goes down 41% and do nothing? When the value drops from $1 million to $655,000. That's what happened in 2022 if you own these companies at that particular point in time. So you can see, if you go across, you can see that Broadcom in 2022 was down 13%. I know for a fact at one point it was down 40%. NVIDIA ended the year down 50%. I know at one point it went all the way down 66%. Meta was down 64%. Taiwan Semi was down roughly 37%. These are things that's going to happen every now and then with these companies. You just got to be able to deal with it. If you recognize you own good businesses, you can sit back and you can continue to own them and you can add to them during that particular point in time. But as they continue to grow, so too does your cash flow. So these would be the 5 businesses I would buy based on the metrics of I could only use the PEG ratio and I had to own these businesses for a decade. I plan on owning them for a decade anyway. So 4 out of the 5 are already in my Roth, which I can't touch for 8 years. And as of today, there's a 0% chance, as of March 18th, 2026, there's a 0% chance that I'm going to sell any one of these companies, and I'm just going to own them and just let them compound. And then in 2034, once I can start selling my 5% or whatever percent I choose, I'm going to do it every single year. And I anticipate that my cash flow is going to continue to grow, and also the value of the holdings will continue to grow. They're great businesses.